We wrapped up our coverage of the second round talking about a big upset. It was Lerner Tien over Daniil Medvedev. Well, the big upset of the third round on the men's side comes in the same quarter, and it is Gael Monfils taking out number 4 seed Taylor Fritz in 4 sets. We'll talk a lot about that match. I'll go quickly on some other third round results, but this isn't going to be a big, long, detailed third round show like I did for the second round, because frankly, after grinding really hard and losing a lot of sleep through the first 5 days of the tournament, I kind of hit a bit of a physical wall, and that's why this is coming out a little bit later and why it's going to be a bit shorter and not quite as much content for this third round. However, I will go long on the Fritz Monfils match, which I not only kind of watched once, I actually went back, watched a lot of it again to try to get a really good grip on what went down here, because it's a big, important result. And Monfils is now 9-1 in 2025, and that one loss is to Djokovic. Wins Auckland week before the Australian Open, becomes the oldest player ever to win an ATP title. And now he backs it up by beating the 4 seed, the guy who made the final at the last hardcourt major. Unbelievable. From a 38-year-old Gael Monfils, who has become a totally unexpected titan of longevity. What a privilege it has been for all tennis fans to continue to see Gael Monfils operate at this level. And I say unexpected because you think about the style that he has implemented throughout his career, and it is utterly mind-blowing that this guy has outlasted as many of his peers as he has, which is almost all of them, to be completely honest with you. Who has put in more sprints? Who has undergone more mileage? Who has spent more time defending in professional tennis in the last 20 years than Gael Monfils? I don't think anybody. And for that reason alone, you would not back his play style to be one that lends itself to longevity. But here he is. Oldest to do that. Oldest since that. Third oldest since, he continues to compile these kinds of records. And it is remarkable to see. And a privilege. As for the match, what a stellar performance. What an outstanding display from Monfils. And I watched Taylor Fritz's press conference. I like to watch Fritz's press conferences because compared to 99% of players, Fritz is more honest and more analytical, period. You just get more out of watching his press conferences compared to, again, 99% of players. So I like to watch his press conferences when I can. And Taylor said that he thought he played well. He said that he wouldn't lose much sleep over this result. He said it was just too good from Gael. And Taylor's not always like that. Taylor's willing to be self-critical. Look at his press conference after losing to Jannik Sinner in the U.S. Open final. He was very disappointed in himself. He was pissed off. Not this time. This time he was like, hey, what can you do? He was incredible. And I mostly agree with Taylor. Now, I think there are some limitations in his game that certainly prevented him, that could have offered up solutions that didn't. So we'll get into that as kind of part 2 of this analysis. But part 1 of this analysis has to be how many things Gael did well. And I think that starts with the fact that offensively, he was just as good as he was defensively. One of the things that might encapsulate that is how he saved the 2 break points in the 4th set, where he almost went down a break. First break point was 30-40. He hit a big first serve out wide, and then a forehand inside out behind Taylor for a winner. Very clear-headed, +1 forehand, lots of conviction. He would end up facing another break point, out, and he missed his first serve. And just when you think, okay, he's going to have to win a rally because he missed his first serve, Gael backs himself and hits a very brave 116 mile per hour second serve down the tee, sliding away from Fritz's forehand to get the unreturnable, to collect the service winner. That's 187 Ks on the second serve. And it's just 2 points, but it gives you a window into Monfils' mentality. He was out for damage. He was willing to take a rip in this match. He was selective. You know, it wasn't like Monfils turned into a ball basher. No. But there was a lot to like in his game offensively. And that was just one example where he saves 2 break points with 3 swings of the racket. Now it certainly helped the offensive game that his first serve was just clicking and firing on all cylinders. Just a massive first serve performance by Monfils. And that sets the tone, right? If you want to play offensive tennis, your serve sets the tone. It sets you up in good positions to win points, and it takes a lot of pressure off. Maybe allows you to swing a little bit freer on your return games when you feel like you're just in this awesome service rhythm, which Monfils was almost the entire time. He ends this match with 24 aces. And if you put it into a rate, which I like to look at, his ace rate was 19.8%, which if you take every match that he's played in his career at slams, because I think best of 5, it just means more. It's one thing to serve well for 2 sets. It's another thing to do it in best of 5. So if you just look at his slam matches, 192 of them he's played. This was his 8th highest ace rate ever. And when I was looking at that record, I was scrolling through and looking at all of his matches where he had a great ace rate. I was like, wow, he's like won all these matches. So I'll give you another stat. When Monfils has had an ace rate of 16% or higher, his record in slams is 25-2. Pretty amazing. And it wasn't just the first serve, because I mentioned the big second serve when he was down the break point. His second serve average speed was 103 miles per hour. Pretty awesome. Impossible to attack on 103 mile per hour slice serve on a consistent basis. And that's what Monfils was throwing Taylor's way on the second delivery. I was also impressed. Moving on to some other things beyond the serve, I was impressed with Monfils' backhand. Sometimes you get the feeling that Gael is just kind of unthreatening with his two-hander, that he can't really hurt you off of it. But Monfils was really feeling the backhand down the line. And it felt like it caught Fritz off guard oftentimes, that he just didn't move out all that well, the backhand down the line, which we see a lot of the times from righties who are looking to hit big forehands, that they're just not really ready to defend their forehand necessarily when they go into their opponent's righty backhand. So Monfils was sometimes getting up on the baseline and hitting the backhand down the line, doing damage with it. So that was something that was sort of a part of Monfils' game. You don't always see that. And he did a great job of mixing things up. So not only was he willing to go backhand down the line, but you'd almost never see him go medium pace, backhand cross 3 times in a row and just allow Taylor to kind of settle into that rhythm. It almost felt like for a Gael, it was either really, really slow or really, really fast. And you had that changing of tempo that never let Taylor settle. So a lot of backhand slice, slow, short backhand slice. He'd mix in some high, heavy balls. So, you're moving Taylor inside the court. You're making him maybe move back to achieve the ideal contact point on on a higher, heavier ball. just constantly mixing up the tempo. And something Gael does so well is he lulls you into a false sense of security, because when he's going sort of like, when he's not hitting the ball hard, and Gael will spend large swaths of a baseline rally at times not hitting the ball hard and just kind of throwing in variety, where it's like high ball, short slice, slow one up the middle. And when that's how he's playing, sometimes you forget that you need to kind of make sure that you're keeping up your quality of trade, because Fritz will take the slow stuff and he'll reply with more slow stuff. He'll hit sort of a weak trade, and then maybe Monfils will massage it back, or maybe he'll crush it. Like maybe he'll inject pace off of that slower trade. So it's so important you keep your guard up and you maintain your ground stroke speed. And there were times that I thought Fritz was almost just like lulled into playing Monfils' game of sort of massaging the ball around the court, and then Gael could catch him off guard when he injected pace. Very interesting thing that Monfils does with that. Yeah, like that slow. So you'll see the tempo of the rally. It'll be like slow, fast. And that's where Gael loves that. Drop shots, awesome from Monfils. Great play against Taylor. But the execution for Gael was really superlative. His hands are just incredible sometimes. He can hit the drop shot from behind the baseline and land it beautifully. He did it on a consistent basis. He was hitting a lot of drop shots in like a deep to deep situation, which is hard, right? The drop shot is sometimes available if Taylor is really, really far back. But if Gael's really, really far back, okay, it's still hard to hit the drop shot short in the court. You don't want to hit it in the net, but you also don't want to hit it to the service line. And it takes really, really great hands to do that when you are behind the baseline, like especially when you're 5 feet behind the baseline. I was just blown away by how many great drop shots Monfils hit from really deep in the court. Then when Fritz gets up to the drop shot, he doesn't like to redrop. And frankly, when you see a drop shot and then the player doesn't follow the drop shot up to the net, you probably should redrop. Taylor doesn't like to do that, and Monfils usually had a look at the next ball. He did a great job of passing off of that next ball, or in many cases, lobbing off of that next ball. So the drop shot was also a really good bit of variation from Monfils, which is going to be relevant in our next conversation, because I do want to talk about Gael's defense. It would be totally inaccurate to suggest that Monfils won this match by being a attacking juggernaut and taking the racket out of Taylor's hands. He did a lot of that, especially with his first serve. But to act like that was how Gael won the match would be disingenuous. Ultimately, just like vintage Monfils, it was the ability to stay in points, the suffocating movement and defense, which oftentimes eventually turns to offense. That was a major factor here, as Taylor felt like he had no way to finish. Sometimes that happens to Taylor Fritz. It happened to Taylor Fritz against Lorenzo Musetti at Wimbledon. He felt like he couldn't finish. He couldn't find a way through. And I'll mention this a little bit later, but I think Gael Monfils is a lot like Lorenzo Musetti in that way. I think there's some similarities. Fritz talked about this in the press conference. He mentioned the balls. These Dunlop balls get fluffy and slow. They do. There's no doubt about it. I've been watching a lot of matches this tournament thinking, oh my God, this looks slow. This just looks really, really slow. And I don't think it's because of the court. I don't think anybody thinks it's because of the court. Fritz said that once the balls were played with a couple of games, he felt like he couldn't do damage. He even specifically mentioned that he couldn't even do enough damage to find a way up to the net, which is important because I want to talk about that in detail. This also, by the way, speaks to how big and strong Monfils is on his forehand, because I have never watched a match, not once, and felt, oh, the conditions are too heavy for Gael's forehand to get through. I mean, it is such a heavyweight weapon, and if you look at the average speeds, Monfils is never going to finish like really high average forehand speed because he hits too many slow balls, which that's going to just drive down his average. But his ability when he does inject pace to just obliterate the ball, incredible weight of shot that Monfils has access to. So it never felt like Monfils had too much trouble doing damage from the back of the court. And of course, Taylor doesn't move quite as well. It doesn't defend quite as well as Gael. So you have an easier target, of course, when you're looking to finish points and damage Taylor Fritz. But Gael had no trouble doing it with his forehand. And I think you should I think it's important to appreciate just how big Monfils' forehand is, even if the balls were fluffy and slow. Now, not only did Taylor say this in his press conference, I read Taylor's lips in the third set when he looked to his coach, Mike Russell, and he said, "I can't hurt him." I read his lips. He said that. So naturally, let's rewind. Let's look at the footage. What happened on that point? Taylor hit a good serve, and he got a short forehand. He got a good attackable +1 forehand, and he ripped it into the corner. And Monfils gave a lot of ground. He ranged to his right. He hit a running forehand that was excellent. Cross court, neutralizing, and he got back in the point. A couple shots later, he won the point. Well, two things become clear. The first thing is, hey, Taylor's right. That's a good +1 forehand. He hit it hard, and he hit it into the corner. What more could you ask for? And that's what Taylor was clearly saying in his head. What am I supposed to do? I hit a hard forehand into the corner. Like, what the heck do you want from me here? All right? It's a fair point. But a good drop shot would have won him the point because Gael was in the process of retreating. And I just talked about how Gael was hitting a lot of drop shots, deep position to deep position. Well, this was an easier scenario to hit a drop shot in. This is Fritz inside the court, Monfils way outside the court, way behind the baseline. That's when you want to hit a drop shot. So yeah, it's hard to hit through Monfils when he's 15 feet behind the baseline. The other thing is if Taylor approached the net behind his forehand, he would have had an ocean of court to hit a drop volley into. Another product of how deep in the court Monfils ranged back to defend that ball. He might have had a somewhat low volley, but I think a good close with good positioning, and he would have had a very manageable volley and tons of space for the dropper. So this is kind of in tune with, here's my opinion on Taylor's inability to finish in this match. I agree with him that there's not much he could have done, but I think that if he was a little bit more aggressive with his feet to take extra time away, and then if he could close harder to the net and get in great position inside the service box, I think he would have been able to finish fine. I think he would have been able to finish just fine. But the reason why he feels like he can't get to the net, and he obviously felt like I can't hit a good enough ball to get a floater and put away a volley. The problem is Taylor always needs a floater because if he doesn't get a floater, then he's never close enough to the net to put away the volley. I feel very strongly about this. The problem with Fritz's volleys are not really his volleys. And don't get me wrong, he's not the best volleyer in the world. But I think he can hit a volley. What he can't do, what I think he is very bad at, is closing the net. I don't think like when I watch how this plays out, he's constantly volleying from behind the service line or at the service line, constantly hitting half volleys, volleying from his shoelaces, volleying from his feet. Like, he just can't close. He's not good at closing. And I was watching it a lot in this match, and it happened twice the game he lost serve in the fourth set. 4-all. 4-all, he loses serve, and now Monfils serves for the match. And first point of the match, and I think the point at 15:30, no, it was actually the break point, I believe, and the first point of the match, where he just doesn't get tight enough, and then he hits a low volley, and he can't make it. So I think there's two things. One, there are some footwork patterns, and we're going to get really nerdy here. There are some footwork patterns that enable quicker closing in on the net. There's a couple of options. You can kind of, like, some players can almost walk through the shot. Like, Federer was really good at that. And really, it's left foot in front of the right foot. And then you as you put your right foot forward, you really hit the forehand in this case. You hit the forehand off your right foot and sort of run right through the shot. But you have to come off your right leg. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So it's left foot forward, right foot forward, and you hit the forehand. And that's how you kind of look like, and Tsitsipas can do it too. We are kind of like walking through the shot or running through the shot. But it's controlled. It's a footwork pattern that some players are able to sort of get down. Although I think it's a little bit old school. You don't see it as often. The other pattern is if you close your stance and you jump through the ball and you hit the forehand off of your left foot. I don't know if this is going to look good if I can, obviously this is, the best thing is to visualize this. But if you can kind of move inside the court, close your stance, and hit the shot by jumping off of your left leg. So there's certain footwork patterns that are there that Fritz doesn't really do. What he does is he normally anchors himself with a 3/4 stance forehand or an open stance forehand. And then he hits the shot, and then he tries to get in. You can close the net like that. Like, you don't need to necessarily come through the shot with a lot of momentum in order to successfully close the net. But boy, after you hit the shot, you better go. And sometimes it looks like Taylor is like moseying on in. Like he doesn't have that urgency. He needs to explode out of the shot. This is the one thing, if I were Mike Russell, and I totally agree with Taylor that he played a good match. I totally agree with Taylor that Gael was unbelievable and there's not much we could do. But the one thing I'd look at is some of the approach shots that he hit and how hard he was closing the net, where it just looked like sometimes, like, dude, you have an extra 15% of speed that you could probably access if your mentality was a little bit more urgent about closing the net. But of course, drop shots and transition game, we know those aren't really Taylor's strengths. So that's not much of a critique, as much as it is like a matchup problem. Again, same thing at Wimbledon when Taylor just couldn't really find a finish because Lorenzo Musetti is exceptional defensively. Well, same thing with Monfils. I also do think that Fritz struggled with the heat. I think his feet were a little bit more sluggish than they would normally be, especially in between shots. I felt that at times he wasn't active enough in his positioning. Whether it be he hit a really good shot and he didn't get up on the baseline fast enough to take time away, or he hit a not so good shot and he didn't give enough ground. So when Monfils attacked, Taylor was not really in position to defend. So that's the off-ball movement in between shots. I didn't think it was so sharp, and I thought there were even some examples of him not really getting the drive off the ground on his ground strokes, or the drive from his legs on his ground strokes, which kind of reduced the speed of them, which again added to the idea that he couldn't get the ball through the court and through Monfils' stellar defense. And that's all I got on the match. Things were going decently well for Fritz, by the way. He won the first set, and he was serving 5-6 in the second set, having not been broken all tournament long. So that's another thing. It's another feather in Gael's cap. It's like Taylor was crushing everybody en route to this. And he looked good at United Cup, in my opinion. It's an informed Taylor Fritz that Monfils took out. Okay, now let's get to some other matches. And natural place to start is the Shelton Musetti match, because that's the other match in this quarter. Really interesting one. And the best of 5 versus best of 3 split continues for Ben. He's been so much better at the majors. 69% win rate at the slams, 53% in best of 3. So the record in best of 3 is 51-45, and in slams it's 22-10. Look, I think he showed the reason for that. An ice cube in my mouth. I didn't mean to swallow that ice cube, but I ended up swallowing that ice cube. In the fourth set, at 5-all in the tiebreak, the way he played these 2 points perfectly encapsulates to me why Ben is so good at the majors. It's the fact that he meets every moment with confidence and courage. He is just, we've covered this before, but the fearlessness in crunch time, in pressurized situations, when the scoreboard is suggesting that it's time to like maybe get tentative, it's just not in Ben's DNA. He'll never get tentative, and he'll always back himself in these spots. It's not like he's being recklessly aggressive and making bad decisions and missing. Sometimes that's happened in Ben's career where it seems like the shot selection isn't that good. But none of these were bad decisions. They were just... All right, so at 5-all, he dictates with his backhand, sharp-angled backhands cross-court, steps into a backhand drop shot down the line, which was heavy-handed. Musetti got there with plenty of time, and Ben anticipates it and hits a reflex volley into the open court. This was one that Musetti would love to have back because he should have made the pass. But it's what he did on the 6-5 match point that was really impressive to me. And to the untrained eye, this looks like an easy forehand. Shelton hit a good first serve. Musetti chipped the return back. It's a low chip, short in the court, into Ben's backhand side. And Shelton does excellent work with his feet, not only getting up inside the court, but also running around his backhand to create a forehand. But he's got a low contact point forehand from well inside the baseline, maybe 4 or 5 feet inside the baseline. And again, untrained eye looks like an easy forehand because it's a short ball. Trained eye, you realize really low contact point, way inside the court, pressurized moment. You got to get that ball up over the net and down before the baseline really quickly. It's going to require a ton of acceleration, ton of RPMs on the ball. And I just think the vast majority of players would have played this forehand aggressive, but not aggressive enough to finish. Especially not against Musetti, who moves so well. Ben ripped it. Ben hit an absolute beauty, +1 forehand inside out. And Musetti can't touch the ball. No play on it. So, again, that's only 1 point. But to me, in a nutshell, this is why Ben does so well at these slams. In the biggest moment, he's backing himself. He's being fearless. He's being aggressive. And he's got the weapons to do it and to execute it. So, who is coming out of this quarter? It's Tien versus Sonego and Monfils versus Shelton. Well, all right, I like Monfils or Shelton as much as As much as, Lerner's played great, the mileage on his legs at some point should catch up with him. Like, this just seems untenable. How many 5-setters can you play, especially at that age? Lorenzo Sanigo is just kind of a hot and cold player. I've never seen him string it together for too many matches in a row. I think his top level is awesome. That's why this is a guy who's won 4 ATP titles, and, he's done it on all surfaces, but best of 5, 2-week event. No, I wouldn't get behind him. So for me, it's Monfils or Shelton. And the first thing I'll say is I think Musetti is the best possible warm-up you can have when you're about to play Gael Monfils. I think they present a lot of the same challenges. There's a lot of differences. Don't get me wrong. They're not the same player. But you could make an argument that Monfils, in some ways, is a slightly worse version of Musetti. Maybe not with the way he's playing, because Gael is just so red hot. But point is, I think Ben just passed a very similar test. I think the miles on Gael's legs are a concern. He played the week before the Australian Open. He won that title in Auckland. He's now played a bunch of matches afterwards. So Gael is going now on a whole lot of tennis. And big match Ben. We've seen him make these runs at these majors on hard court. He is confident in himself. I think he's made some really solid improvements. I do think the backhand looks different. Hugh Clark at threat of order feels like he also raised his take back. I mentioned that I feel like maybe he moved his grip over a little bit, but it might just be the increased wrist action he seems to be getting on that backhand, because sometimes it's just very army, and it's always very low to high, but sometimes it's very army, and I feel like now there's just a little bit more right wrist involvement. Anyway, I'm picking Shelton to make the semis here. And again, I thought he'd lose in the first round in Nakashima. I said that in the preview. So it's not like I came into the tournament really high on Shelton, but I think the stars are, again, aligning for him. That said, I understand that 90% of the tennis world wants Monfils to win this and make the semifinal, and I totally get it. Totally, and completely get it. Monfils is the darling here. He is the guy who everybody is going to be pulling for, rightly so. But I do think Ben. I think it's going to be Ben. Just a few other results to run through. Alejandro Davidovich Fokina comes back again versus Jakub Mensik. 2 sets to love down. Back-to-back matches. He did it to Felix. Now he does it to Mensik. And holy moly, you watch Davidovich Fokina in the 5th set of this match against Mensik. He is playing his 10th set in 3 days. The spring in his legs is ridiculous. The athleticism is absurd with this guy. He has the legs of a top 5 player. It's just about getting everything else right for him. That could be hit or miss. But of course, Mensik, 2 sets to love up. A lot of opportunities to win this in straights. He served for it at 5-4. He started that game with 2 unreturned serves, went up 30 love. At 30 love, he decelled on a second serve and hit a double fault. There was a little cat and mouse exchange where Mensik kind of slapped a forehand volley long. A little bit of a panicky attempt there. Made a couple of forehand unforced errors after that, 2 in a row. So second serve got tight, forehand got tight. Improv skills looked a little rough. And then we saw a lot of the same things happen in the 3rd set tiebreak, where he was up 5-4, first of all. At 5-4, Davidovich Fokina hits a pretty bad drop shot. Mensik should have driven the backhand. It was high enough. He slices it. And then ADF hits a volley into the open court that Mensik is there in plenty of time, but he's got the wrong grip. He's got a continental grip. And again, he kind of slaps at the ball, and it's a kind of a panic slice forehand pass into the net. So another cat and mouse exchange where Mensik he didn't look comfortable. Didn't look comfortable improvising. He does have a match point at 5-6 and kind of hits a tight backhand, net cord, trickles over. Davidovich Fokina turns on the afterburners, digs it out, and his slice, or his dig, as I would call it, is really deep in the court. So Mensik has to kind of throw up a lob, and Davidovich Fokina hits a smash winner. I wouldn't be too critical of Mensik on this point. He did look very tight on this backhand, although it almost won him the point on the net cord. This was a good play by Davidovich Fokina. He would get another match point. Mensik missed his first serve again. This was a common theme, by the way. That could have been, like, in an ideal situation, although Mensik might get tight, the first serve is going to kind of power him through. That's his most comfortable weapon. It did not. Jakub did not make first serves. This second match point, Mensik on the backhand, slice down the middle of the court that just looked tight. Again, it's just a tight slice that he's just putting in the middle. You can tell he's not comfortable. Davidovich Fokina takes the invitation. Good forehand approach cross court, good backhand volley, short angle, puts it away. Really good overall point by Davidovich Fokina. But I just thought that short ball on the slice by Mensik was a little bit cheap. Then, it's a couple of forced errors by Davidovich Fokina into Mensik's forehand. None of them were like unforced errors, but both of them were very makeable. It was a passing shot, and it was a ball he should have successfully been able to neutralize and defend. So, Mensik's first serve went AWOL. His backhands, he didn't make any backhand errors, but it got tight, and he kept kind of putting the ball in the middle of the court with his backhand. And the forehand did leak some errors. So Mensik got tight and played his age. There's no doubt about it. What I am fearful of, though, is that like he is looking a little bit Zverev-ish with how his forehand at times can react to pressurized situations and how his second serve can look at times in pressurized situations. There's a massive delta between the first serve and the second serve for Jakub Mensik at the moment, which is something that I think he needs to work on. But great Australian Open for the kid. Very young. So no need to ring the alarm bells or anything of the sort. Rune Kecmanovic. I didn't watch this one, but I did watch the extended highlights and I read a lot about the match, and everything I've seen and read suggests that Rune did not have a ton of juice in the legs come the fifth set towards the end, which is not surprising. The match against Berrettini was 4 sets and it was intense. The first round match against Zhang was 5 sets. So now he's going 5 again. He's coming back from down 2-1. And apparently it didn't look like he had much in the legs, even watching the highlights. He was chugging pickle juice so that he didn't cramp, and he had to play really aggressive. Well, we've talked about this before, but Rune has the luxury so often, and I thought his legs got tired in the 5th set of the Triple Z match as well. And he starts making a lot of low percentage attacking balls. The game he broke Zhang at the end of the 5th set was three massive first serve returns, like really aggressive first serve returns. Not usually a very high percentage proposition to try to do damage off of a first serve in the men's game. But Rune did it against Zhang. And in this match, again, the talent is so immense. He hit 83 winners in this match. The talent is so immense that sometimes in these emergency situations, he's able to make it work and find a way. And you definitely want to see him not abuse his powers in that respect. And I think in some ways, maybe the fact that he can get away with this so often has allowed him to cut corners in developing his shot selection, maybe at times cut corners in developing his fitness. But it's also really good to see the mental resilience from Rune at this tournament, pulling out tough wins. Down 2 sets and a break, he's able to come back and beat Misha Kecmanovic. So, big win for Rune. It is hard to imagine he goes into the center match with the gas tank that will be required for him to be competitive against Jannik. Lastly, there's two more. Michelsen over Khachanov in straights. Crazy level for Alex Michelsen. This is another matchup where the backhand down the line is huge. It's really important. And it's incredibly tough. The reason for that, it's incredibly tough for anything good to happen when you're trading cross-court backhands with Khachanov. Nothing good happens. Maybe nothing terrible will happen. Maybe he won't hit you off the court. But, because he has such a physical edge usually, it spells bad news. It's just almost impossible to make progress. So Khachanov being a guy who has a great backhand shield, it's very hard to make progress. But he's got rushable forehand defense. That is the perfect matchup to utilize the backhand down the line, to make him run into his forehand as much as possible. That's going to be how you beat Khachanov. That's everybody's scouting report. Put pressure on that forehand, make him run there, rush him there. If you don't have the backhand down the line that Michelsen possesses, that's a much, much harder ask. But for Michelsen, it's not a tough ask. He can do it. So, the matchup against Tsitsipas, we talked about how he's a runaround forehand player. And against runaround forehand players, the backhand down the line is such a valuable commodity. Same thing against somebody with Khachanov's style. Michelsen also had an incredible forehand day. He said after the match that he's never hit the forehand like that in his life. And that's trouble. That's bad news, because when you're playing Michelsen, that's kind of what you're relying on to provide you some relief. His forehand can go really hot and cold on him. He is not reliable on that wing when he's attacking. So you really need him to miss some. And it seemed like in this match, he wasn't going to miss any. And that was tough sledding for Khachanov. I look at how the second set tiebreak ended. And it's just so impressive the way he won both of these points. 5-all, second set tiebreak. And look, this is the swing moment. This is the moment where it's either going to be 2-0 Michelsen, or it's going to be a set apiece, and you're in a war against somebody who is as good as anybody else at winning these long wars, best of 5, seasoned, grizzled, physical veteran in Karen Khachanov. It's 5-all in the second set tiebreak. And Michelsen chips a backhand short to Karen's forehand. Khachanov hits a forehand cross, pretty big, but he has to move inside the court, hit the forehand low contact point. And Michelsen just knows you're taking that cross. When you have to hit from below your knees inside the court, you're going cross. There's no way you want to get that ball up and down over the high part of the net with less court to work with. So Alex cheats cross, he gets cross, and counters with a forehand down the line that was so deep that Khachanov couldn't touch it. It wasn't actually directionally that close to the sideline. But Karen was moved inside the court with the slice, and therefore his positioning was too far inside the court to be able to handle the depth that Michelsen's next forehand, the depth and the pace that Michelsen was able to lace that next forehand with. At 6-5, and by the way, that pattern wasn't a one-off. You saw multiple times Michelsen went chip down the line to Karen's forehand and then lean cross and then go down the line with his next forehand. 6-5, Michelsen running forehand cross court nice and deep. Khachanov hits the next one softly down the line, and Alex steps in and just clubs the backhand down the line. Pure strike. Clean winner. Just a really phenomenal last couple points to go up 2-0. And I just wanted to highlight that. Lastly, Minaur beats Cerundolo in 4, but he almost went down 2-0. And that was the key. I mean, this was a match where Alex was under the pump for a long time. Lost the first set, and the second set was a slog. He could not find a lead. He could not find separation. Cerundolo was dialed in. Again, when he is at his best, he's a top 10 baseliner in the world. And the way these two guys play, like, de Minaur is not going to serve you off the court. Cerundolo is not going to serve you off the court. Like, it's going to be a baseline battle. And when Cerundolo is in that kind of match with somebody whose serve is not going to overwhelm him, and he is playing his best from the back from a ball striking standpoint, he's just a nightmare. But the key was that de Minaur was able to win the second set without his best level. There was an expiration on Cerundolo's physicality and focus. And this is part of the problem with Francisco. He just, as a competitor, it's just a little bit up and down. And he's not great when stuff gets tough. He's not great when there's adversity. So you just feel like if you're able to land a big body blow, and in this case, that big body blow was de Minaur winning the second set, you can diminish him as a player. And physically and focus-wise, with the consistency, it was not the same Francisco Cerundolo in the third and the fourth set. And de Minaur, this is a strength of his. He'll win matches like this just by staying more present throughout a match. That's a big advantage he has over Cerundolo in general, and it was the difference in this match. And de Minaur says his legs are back. That's what he said. He started hitting his legs in the fourth set, and then Jim Courier after the match was like, why were you hitting your legs? And he was like, my legs are back. They're back, baby. And what he's referring to is the fact that even when he came back from the hip injury in the second half of 2024, he was not himself. His movement was not the same. It was never the same. I was saying that the whole time. And now he's saying, look out, because my movement is back to where it needs to be. So look out, we will. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.